Salam alaikum and good evening, everyone. I'm happy to be hosting the last edition of the Cultural Salon series, in which we started last October in collaboration with Fikra and the Decca podcast in its first two editions, and of course with the support of the Ministry of Culture and Knowledge Development. The Cultural Salon was initiated to build a bond and gap the bridge between generations in a cultural manner through casual conversations in which we host by bringing experts together to discuss various topics. Our fourth session, which was physically scheduled to be in April, but given the pandemic and these unprecedented times, we are happy to be hosting it virtually today and bringing together four amazing guest speakers who are with me here tonight to mystically talk about food, where the discussion will tackle ways in which culinary traditions and recipes feed not only the body, but the mind and the collectivity of the community. Allow me to introduce here the ladies first. Hanan Saidurel, the author of Table Tales and currently the representative of the Guggenheim Foundation in Abu Dhabi. Ashil Mheri, the creative and mastermind behind the ongoing project that presents Emirati food culture in a very brilliant manner. Agrobo, Chef Khalid, who is a co-founder of Fay Cafe/restaurant, who infuses and elevates Emirati cuisine to fine dining. And last but not least, Mufaddal Hussein, who is an experienced designer at Frying Pan Adventures. Hanan.
So Table Tales is really a story, as Fatma said, it's a story of a community forming itself through the sharing of food, traditions, and culture. I embarked on it about 5 years ago. I did not know what it was going to end up as. It's the story, the book spans the last half century. It presents a slice of the social history of Abu Dhabi through the stories and recipes of locals and expatriates who've made the city home. So I like to think of it as a collective memoir told through food. As I said, I started the journey in 2015. I invited 40 people to share their stories and recipes as a nod to the city's hundreds of communities that contribute to this immense tapestry of cuisine. And for many faiths, it represents an approximation of a larger number. It also represents periods of transformation, which the city has seen and which is also going through now, and I'm reminded of. And really what connects the people and the recipes in the book is more than just the food and the good food. It's really the experience of being a global nomad, traveler, a curious traveler, the notion of home, the spirit of generosity, the importance of hospitality, and really the value of friendships. And nothing has been more heartening to me than during this lockdown to look back at these images, read some of the stories, connect with the people in the book, both virtually, well, mostly virtually. And really living here has been an experience and connection. Again and again, I saw people arrive, leave behind their countries, create transitory homes, and then move on. But at the same time, they leave such a big impression on our lives and on who we are and who we become and how we see the world. So it really got me to start thinking about how to capture these stories. And I started to see in action what social anthropologists refer to as, cooking can be a language, as a form of narrative that marks our culture. And I realized that that's really what distinguishes us. And hospitality, if it's offered as a feast or even a cup of coffee, is really what makes us civilized. And that's the story that I wanted to share. So I began dreaming of this book, and it's, a book that would, be a physical manifestation and would say that, this is who we are, this is what we ate, and this is what we became. So that's the speedy fast forward visuals. I hope you got a glimpse of what's in the book and a reminder of many of our favorite places and our favorite people.
Thank you, Hanan. Yes, you actually did make us miss on these places and the fact that we are not able to access them. However, you kind of made a visual memory and took us back. Moving on to Asha, if you can go ahead and introduce yourself. And just to let the audience know, I came upon Asha when having a look at the capstone projects presented at AUS, and her project spoke to me the most, honestly, Grubu. So Asha, please introduce yourself and how Grubu started, perhaps.
Inshallah. أول شيء السلام عليكم. I hope everyone has had a great Ramadan. My name is Asha Mhiri. I'm a graphic designer, graduate from AUS, and I'm going to present to you today, inshallah, my capstone project, which I've worked on during the last year of my time in AUS. Grubu, for those who have not maybe seen the project, is an archival publication that contains information that relates and evolves around the food and culture in the UAE. It has manifested into a book containing 5 successfully completed chapters, and it is an ongoing project. Some of the chapters include information about the Arabs' hospitality in the UAE, the coffee culture, or the coffee etiquette, as some might say. It contains information about traditional Arabic breads. This is part of it. Thank you for sharing, Fatma. So these are some of these spreads that are in the publication itself. This is a spread that discusses coffee etiquette, and the second spread is a display of the measurements that people used to use in the past, unlike what we use nowadays, which is like we use the metric system, the ounces, the cups, and so on. So this was a more traditional approach. These are also other traditional measurement tools. So this book basically archives the culture in the culture of the Emirati food culture, basically.
I must say my favorite method of measurement is the grandma's hand here.
Yes.
And yeah.
And this is a recipe, which it's a recipe that I displayed using typography. It contains the system of the measurement tools that my grandma used to use, basically. So it's not measured in cups or ounces, it's measured in the traditional way. So it's like using your hands or the tools that were just displayed a while ago.
Okay, we won't share all the spreads from Asha's book yet. We will have them during the conversation. I go on to Mufadal from the Frying Pan Adventures. Mufadal, please take over the mic to introduce yourself and what you do as an experienced designer for Frying Pan Adventures.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Fatima, for inviting me to this discussion. It's a pleasure and an honor to be here. I work as an eating designer at Frying Pan Adventures. Let me talk a little bit about Frying Pan Adventures, and then I'll talk a little bit about my work over there. Frying Pan Adventures is Dubai and the UAE's, in fact, first food tourism company. We take tourists as well as curious residents on walking food tours to explore the food of the city as it is on its streets. It started out 7 years ago as from the blog of our founder, Arwa Ahmed, and now we're a small but enthusiastic team of 8, 7 years going strong. And after hosting around 10,000 guests, we're the #1 food and dining experience on TripAdvisor for Dubai. Primarily, our tours are geared towards tourists. So we have 3 main tours, which is our Middle Eastern food pilgrimage, which explores all the foods around the Middle East and shows you the differences between all of those foods, because not everyone understands the differences between what is Levantine cuisine, what is Khaliji cuisine, and all the other nations and cultures in between. Apart from that, we also do our Little India on a Plate in Bardubai, and we do a souk store which moves between Al Ras and Fahidi. Apart from that, we've also explored on tours a little bit beyond Dubai. We've explored Alain, Dibba, Sharjah, and trying to unearth all of these untold stories that exist and the people who are related to those stories, and as well as experience the food around that. So while the food is important, it is just a part of the entire experience. It's about connecting with people, fostering understanding, as well as eating delicious food, of course. And just exploring all the cultures that call the UAE home. And I joined the team about 2.5 years ago to work as an eating designer. That doesn't mean I eat for a living. It is definitely a part of what I do. However, it means that my primary role is to unearth new places, new foods, and new stories for us to tell. And not necessarily just new stories, but stories that have been sitting around for a while but haven't been spoken of yet. It allows us to connect and see the human connections between all of us that exist and call the UAE home, essentially. When I started working at Frying Pan Adventures, while we were catering more to the tourist market, we had a number of guests who had been on all of our tours and were asking us what's more, what's next. There are so many cultures and so many cuisines that are here, but we want to explore them with you. And that's where we launched our Sufra of experiences. And Sufra, the reason we call it Sufra is because Sufra has that same connotation. So many languages are in and around the region, whether it's in Georgia, whether it's in Persia, whether it's in the Levant, whether it's over here. And it's that combined feast and feasting together, but at the same time hearing each other's stories and connecting with each other over the food. Some of the experiences that we've done in Sufra, and some of my favorites, one of them was in Alain, where we visited Emirati historian Mrs. Ghaya Al-Dahiri, who's written a whole book around Gahwa and the coffee etiquette that Aisha was talking about as well. We visited Dibba and Fujairah to see the first oyster farm that's cultivating edible oysters in the waters off of the UAE coast. We explored different cultures and how they eat with their hands, which is a challenge for some people who haven't experienced it, but also the very act of eating with your hand. What does it mean and why is it so important? And also exploring regional Chinese cuisines in International City, for example.
Thank you, Mufaddal. I move on now to Khalid, who transforms, as I mentioned, Emirati cuisine to fine dining. Which sounds like quite a journey for these dishes to go through. So, Khalid, what made you take that route? And if you can also briefly talk to us of how you started upon this career.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so hi. It's great to see friendly faces like Ms. Hanan. And I thank you, Fatma, for arranging this, and the Ministry of Culture. Just to touch up basically on how it all started. I'm an Emirati chef, and it started about 5 years ago. So basically, I used to love going to the market, and I would love to enjoy the weekend ripe market and farmers markets. And then I saw this, grilled cheese sandwich truck that was brought by Etisalat all the way from the UK. And then I was like, well, you know what? It's really easy, and it reminds me of when I used to study abroad. It's something that I would easily make in between classes. So I thought I should start with something as simple as a grilled cheese sandwich and see how it goes. And the thing is, I wanted to experience making it myself in front of everyone, and get to hear the feedback hands-on on the work that I was doing. And then from there, I mean, I was given the opportunity to participate in the launch pad that was at the Emirates Towers in the youth hub there. And then from there, it caught the attention of the team at the Ministry of Culture, where they were graceful enough to give me an opportunity to represent the UAE in Paris. And I wasn't really ready at all. So I was determined to try to change from just flipping grilled cheese sandwiches, and wanted to learn something a bit more complex, something at least that would make everyone proud. I mean, it was kind of a burden to or kind of pressuring to think that I would be able to represent the UAE in the city of food, basically the city of refined food, in Paris. So the first thing that came to mind was that I needed to elevate my cooking techniques, as opposed to the way that I was, brought up with. Obviously, the hand measurements and all the the bialat al-gawa, that I was able to learn from. So I just thought that wouldn't fly there, obviously. So I had to step into a professional kitchen and learn to, perform professionally. So I went to one of my favorite chefs' restaurant in Dubai. It's in Atlantis Hotel. The restaurant is called Oceano, and it's led by a French chef called Chef Gregoire Berger. And it was there where I was able to take the normal ways of cooking to a more professional approach. And I had to train there for relatively about 5 months before I was able to travel to Paris. And I received positive feedback from the team there, so I took it as a sign that I did a good job there. And then when I came back, even the hotel Atlantis, when they found out that I did a good job, they also opened up all the kitchen doors for me to go and learn in all the other outlets as well. So when I came back, I moved to Nobu, and thank you so much, Your Excellency. So then after I came back from Paris, I wanted to learn different cuisines as well, as opposed to just the fine dining French way. So I went into Nobu, where I learned Japanese cuisine. I went into Hakkasan, where I learned Chinese cuisine. I went into Seafire, and that's where I learned how to work the grill. Then from there, I moved to Bread Street Kitchen, where I was able to work with Gordon Ramsay's restaurant there, and learn the approach of the English cuisine. And then after that, it went from one experience to another, from just different projects that I've had, and different collaborations where I was able to demonstrate some of the Emirati flavors, but in a more refined way. And that has stayed with me, and I hope that it continues to stay this way with me, and obviously anyone who attempts it, because it's just I mean, I know it might sound from a philosophical standpoint that Emirati cuisine is traditional, but I feel like there's room for us to create Emirati cuisine in days like today, And I don't see why we can't create a dish today that can be called an Emirati dish 20 years down the line. So yeah, I mean, to sum up, you know, it's just a great experience. And then I got to meet my incredible partner, Ali al-Mazroui, who I was able to open Fay Cafe with. I basically didn't, you know, give her any choice. I just went and I was like, listen, there's a space in Abu Dhabi Youth Hub. You're partnering with me. We're opening this restaurant. And then, you know, I'm super grateful that I was able to get her support. And yeah, we collaboratively, we were able to open the restaurant Fay Cafe. And just briefly, Fay means shadow. And it's the shadow of the ghaf tree that we have in the middle of the dining area. And yeah, the food is international food. Well, we started with a very comfortable international casual dining menu, but we hope that our next rotation, inshallah, after Eid, we'll be able to demonstrate a bit, you know, like a newer menu with a little more refined dishes.
Okay.
And again, thank you for this opportunity.
You're welcome. Well, we'll tap back into going more into details from where you wrapped up within the conversation. So you're not allowed to wrap up yet on that. Well, I think for me and probably most people, we have a tendency in which we get more active during Ramadan with food. Culturally, I'd say, whether it's through indulging or the traditions that are present within the iftars and suhoors, the togetherness that this holy month brings. And from the title of this session, the mystical side to food, I stumbled upon a hadith that I want to share with the audience, which is in Arabic by Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. كلوا جميعا ولا تفرقوا فإن طعام الواحد يكفي الاثنين وطعام الاثنين يكفي الأربعة, which means, which translates to eat together and do not part, where one's meal is enough for two and a meal for two is actually enough for four, because the blessing is in the togetherness and coming together. So Mufaddal, going back to you, these tours you guide, they bring people together, and I'm pretty sure the experiences and what they offer during Ramadan on normal days away from this pandemic are quite different. So maybe if we can look into that and tell us how these tours happen during this holy month.
So Ramadan is obviously a very special time here in the UAE, in the Muslim world in general, but particularly here in the UAE as well. And what we like to do during Ramadan, essentially with our tours, is highlight that humble side of Ramadan, show how different people in the city observe rituals and traditions of Ramadan, and how it's observed away from you know, the lavish hotel buffets, and rather get back to that spirit of Ramadan, which is being more humble, being more introspective, and also connecting with your fellow man, espousing all those values of brotherhood, fraternity. What we would usually do is start before before iftar or before Maghrib. And what we would do was usually walk through all of these communities, whether it be Naif or Bardubai or Satwa, and try to observe that sense of calm and sense of waiting that settles over those neighborhoods in preparation for the iftar and in preparation of the adhan. It would give us a good time to talk a little bit about what Ramadan means for guests on our tours who are not very familiar with the broader, the finer aspects of Ramadan rather. And what we would then do was observe these communal iftars, these communal public iftars, where people are donating meals and volunteering to help feed all of the people in that community. We would then, after Maghrib, observe as all of these neighborhoods came back to life, as it were, and you would see that calm transform into this hustle and bustle. And then we would go around tasting and experiencing the foods of different cultures and communities within that neighborhood. Of course, with the way the situation is right now, we were not able to do that this Ramadan. So the thing was that right when this pandemic started, we realized that our tours were not going to be the same. It wasn't going to be this the same way that we've been doing it for these past few years. And the initiatives that we started with actually started with taking shape a little bit before Ramadan, where we started to see that the restaurants who we had developed relationships with over this time were starting to get affected by the necessary measures that were put into place. What we then, since we see ourselves as a community organization, what we started thinking about was how do we participate in helping keeping this community together? Whether it is our Hug in a Box initiative, in which the idea was to allow people to maintain that sense of connection with their loved ones by sending over gifts, but at the same time help support our Alibaba's Cave shop, which is Mr. Raza's house of Persian goods, or whether it was our stay-at-home tour tiffin, which was about supporting people who were affected financially and economically by whether they lost their jobs, but then also supporting the restaurants and connecting them with people in our community, our previous guests who were asking us, how can we help? They knew that we always engage with the community. So their first question was that we are participating in various programs, but we want to know how do we help the community that you're engaged in? And Stay-at-Home Tour Tiffin was really about that, supporting our restaurants, but also supporting the people who needed food and answering the call that we got from our supporters. And yeah, so these are the kind of initiatives that have flowed into Ramadan and basically aim to be a part of all these initiatives that the government is doing as well.
Thank you, Mufaddal. That's such, I'd say it still brings in people together, but just in a different format of the current situation. Hanan, I move on to you, where you hosted something also in response to this pandemic through the Instagram page of Table Tales Instagram profile of having these virtual iftars. So how did that idea spark?
Thanks, Fatma. It's really amazing to see what Mufaddal is doing, and I know what Chef Khalid is doing as well in supporting the community and the frontliners through their food businesses. So really, hats off to you guys. It makes me humble. It humbles me to talk about, you know, our simple initiative. So when the pandemic, you know, started, and we realized that we would be in lockdown. This is before Ramadan even. Obviously, we're anticipating Ramadan, but one of my first thoughts was, oh, we won't be able to invite friends at home because a big part of our community is coming around, having meals together at a table. Less about going out and more about just being together and entertaining in our homes. So one of my first thoughts was, how are we going to do that with the lockdown? And so I started thinking of, you know, as we started working from home and we were getting a little bit more familiar with the screen, this is back in like 23rd of April was the first one. I thought, well, let's try a virtual dinner. And right around the same time I was thinking about it, a colleague, friend, collaborator, Professor Jonathan Shannon from NYU Abu Dhabi, who we had co-hosted a conference on Cooking the Nation, he reached out and said, you know, do you want to do something along the lines of a virtual dinner? And so we talked about it and we came up with a framework. Basically, he was teaching a class on, I think, food and ethics. And they were looking at the Black Death pandemic in the 14th century in Italy. And they were reading the book by Boccaccio called The Decameron. And it told the story of 10 Florentines that left Florence during the pandemic to escape, went into the hills, and basically told stories for 10 nights, 10 stories, you came up with 100. So we said, let's have our Table Tales, we called it a distant social dinner society. And we planned 10 dinners, once a week though, because every day would have been a bit overwhelming. We would invite roughly 10 diners and, you know, many more at times. And that evolved into Iftar from Afar, which of course, you know, because we were going into Ramadan. And as everyone said, Ramadan is a very social time. And we really wanted, especially for us who are here, you know, our families are not here, so our friends become our family. And Ramadan is usually the time that we have time to cook and entertain even more from our busy lives. And so we started this Iftar from Afar. It's been, you know, it was very, very nourishing for us. Every dinner has a theme, so we really wanted to talk about, you know, what is the role of food at this time. How, you know, we had a session, a theme about food, comfort food. We talked about food and mood and how food affects our health and our wellness. Food and memory, what are those childhood memories that food brings back? We looked at food as fetish, so the aesthetics of food. We've looked at food and film, you know, food as a cinematic experience. And in a way, it just allowed people to, one, you know, bring out their creativity, allowed us to look kind of deeper. And yeah, I mean, a lot of things came out of it vis-a-vis Ramadan, which I would love to share, but maybe, you know, after everybody else has a conversation on the significance, the kind of blessing that, alhamdulillah, that we've experienced this Ramadan because of the lockdown. And I think it'll be one Ramadan that I'll never forget. And it has given me, I've always thought of food, you know, beyond its nutritional value and for its cultural significance. But I would say this Ramadan, I really began to understand the spiritual aspect of food. You know, and as old as I am, and as many Ramadans that I've been through, I'd say this is the first time that I really have been able to dedicate time and space and mindfulness to think about the spiritual aspect of food that we just take for granted in our busy pre-COVID lives.
Sure. Well, thank you, Hanan, because we truly kind of miss staying connected, especially like we can't even gift dishes to our neighbors, which is, so when you think of it spiritually, that's one thing that the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ made sure kind of happen and is throughout generations. Asha, you mentioned in your research you've looked into Arabic hospitality and etiquette. So are these traditions covered, or are they yet to be covered given the project is still ongoing?
I'm muted. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. Sorry, could you ask the question again? I was busy unmuting.
So yeah, just like Hanan mentioned, that we kind of truly miss staying connected, and how Arabic hospitality and etiquette kind of is heavy on staying connected, just like the gifting of dishes through neighbors. And this Ramadan, we are missing on it truly. So I don't know if that was part of your project, or is it covered in that hospitality chapter?
It is partially. I mean, the act of giving في كرم العرب, which is like Arab's hospitality, the act of giving is one of the main pillars. It has been embedded not only within us in our culture, but also within our religion. And this is why in Ramadan, the act of giving is something that is very important. And of course, due to COVID nowadays, that it has halted that, of course. But I think it's one of the most important aspects of our culture. We've been raised to always share food with our neighbors, with our friends, with our loved ones. It's a gesture of kindness, and like the Arabs in the past really looked up towards that. They look up to people who give, who share. I guess it's a huge part of our culture.
Thank you, Asha. Khalid, going back to you and kind of going to where you wrapped up from the transformation you do to these traditional recipes to a completely different output, explaining what Emirati food to future generations and what it's going to be in future generations. How do your audience perceive these changes? Can they actually tell the origin in which it's inspired from?
Okay, so talking about Emirati food and how it used to be presented. Well, the thing is, a lot of the things that, especially when it comes to gatherings, the way that you would demonstrate good hospitality would be through the generosity of the food that you would be serving, and and how special you would make your guests feel. So lots of the dishes that people used to make would involve, like big dishes with like a whole, carcass of something, that's fully cooked and like, presented with like lots of rice and all these different, dishes that would go along with that main one. But trying to adapt with Emirati cuisine, moving forward, and how it might be perceived by someone abroad or internationally, or how to easily be able to make it a one-portion meal. That is basically what I've been trying to do, is that I would take an Emirati dish that we all know, and then I would try to make it as much as possible presented in one dish where you would be able to have it in, just for one. Let's say if you're going to order it at a restaurant or, as such. But speaking about this Ramadan, it's just, yes, Ramadan is special and it's a special time of the year. But for me, this Ramadan has been really difficult. It's because, coming into the initiative part that we took in a restaurant, Fay Cafe. So what we did was basically, me and Alia, we were just thinking of ways to sustain a form of, just something to keep, our team in the kitchen occupied and help them in a way. We tried to take what we called contributions as opposed to donations, and what we did was we tried to encourage people in the community to purchase meals from the restaurant, but these meals wouldn't be purchased for those individuals specifically, but what they do is they would purchase the meals through us, and then we would handle the making of the meals and then the distribution to healthcare workers and people at labor camps. When we first started, it was just something that we did twice a week, 200 meals a day. And that was only on the first week. And then the second week, we were able to get more contributions, and then the days of the week increased. And then as Ramadan came in, we were able to push out 200 meals almost daily. And then about a week ago, the Khalifa bin Zayed Foundation heard about us, and they came on board to support us as well. And through them, thankfully, we were able to now make almost over 600 meals daily, including the contributions that we would receive from everyone in the community, which, by the way, was just overwhelming, the level of support that we were able to get. Yes, as you can see, our meals basically consist of a form of protein, some rice, a chutney because we know people like it, and then dates to break your fast, and liban and water. So that basically is what we tried to do as a form of giving back to the community, and to also make sure that we are part of something positive. But the thing is about Ramadan being difficult for me this year is because I spend most of my time in the kitchen with my fellow team preparing these meals. I found it very difficult to spend time with my family just because I would try to avoid the possibility of passing something negative, just in case I would carry something. And we do obviously take all the necessary precautions when we are working in the kitchen, but you never know. And those are the people who are most precious to me. And, I just really miss hugging my mom. And it's just, we hope that this whole pandemic is over soon. And we hope that things get back to normal as soon as possible. We are very optimistic, and we are definitely working towards that every day. And we see everyone's, all of the officials' efforts in trying to help us, go through this as smoothly as possible, which is something that will never be forgotten. And on a personal level, I definitely appreciate all the support that the community has been giving us, especially the people who, without this whole this whole thing and chef thing wouldn't have been possible. The people behind the Ministry of Culture, from Noor Al-Kaabi to everyone on her team. I really appreciate the support from everyone, and obviously from you for having me be part in this awesome conversation.
Well, thank you, Khalid, and it's really touching to see how you've contributed and put in all this effort to serving these first-liners and bringing together people in different ways through the contributions. And this also makes you think about the spirituality and how food is deeply connected in that spiritual manner, I'd say. Hanan, I'll go back to you, and perhaps this is a question I would like to address to everyone. When looking at recipes and rituals to enable a deeper connection with food, which ones do you think can establish such a connection? And if it's still relevant, how and why is that? Because I think, like Khalid mentioned, in these giveaways to these first liners and people in need, he mentioned the liban and the dates, which is part of the sunnah to break these fasts. So what recipes, what traditions do you think kind of enable that deeper connection? Hanan, I'll start with you. Probably maybe a recipe from your book.
Well, I mean, it's a difficult question to answer because I think, as we said, food is culture and food is a marker of our identity. And I think at a time like this, when we are feeling stressed, when we're feeling, cut off from our loved ones, when we're looking for something comforting and reassuring, we tend to go back to maybe foods of our childhoods or foods that have a significant memory. I have a mixed background. My dad's Egyptian, my mom's Lebanese, half Lebanese, half Syrian. I grew up in Kuwait. I married to an American from the South. So when my comfort foods and my recipes are very kind of eclectic. And I've finally, in doing this book, come to terms with the fact that I do have multiple identities I embody multiple identities that are also reflected in my food and my table and my recipes. So, this Ramadan, I've explored many of them through the distant social dinners and through the iftar from afar. I've also saw what our other guests were cooking and what was comforting, and starting with that, but then becoming more aware because we're at home and because we're cooking everything that we're eating. Well, most of us. I mean, I know sometimes you have to order in, but because we realize that you really you are in total control of what you put into your body. You're total control of how the food affects you, affects your mood, affects your family, affects your health. And obviously now we're much more aware of health issues and trying to stay healthy. So I have brought those types of recipes more to the forefront, trying to stay with things that, have more immune boosting ingredients, fish, mushroom, coconuts, trying to cook with simple ingredients, and also trying to become, much more aware of what's locally produced. I mean, I think for the first time, many of us, as we go to those grocery stores and as we look and see some of the brands that we're used to getting are not there anymore, and you stop to think, oh, I asked the guy, well, why isn't that here? Well, we don't have flights from Italy, so this used to come from Italy. So, okay, well, we're going to go. So you start becoming more aware of where your food is coming from, understanding the importance of what's grown locally, adjusting to that, being very mindful and being very thankful for النعمة. لما بيقولوا الأكل نعمة, and I remember when we were kids, if a piece of bread fell on the ground, we would pick it up when بوس النعمة. It was so precious, and I think we've lost touch with that. And now is a moment, to me, it's less the recipe and it's more about both sort of emotional but spiritual connection, being mindful of what we eat, how we eat it, being thankful, reflecting on, especially Ramadan, on the Prophet's teachings of how to eat, how to share food, how to be humane to animals. At the end of the day, everything we eat is a sacrament. It's, food is a sacrament. Or you're an omnivore, wherever you are on the spectrum, we're eating something that was formerly living. And so that is a sacrifice. And thinking of that and sharing that with people creates a more mystical communion. Where the food came from, what soil it was grown on, why do tomatoes taste differently when I'm in Lebanon versus when I buy them from Holland versus when I buy them from the organic farm in Al Ain. All of that has been, at least for me and the community that we've been connected with during Ramadan, much more in focus. So it's less about what the final product is. And actually, that's something that's been really a fun part of the iftar from afar. We are preparing iftar. We're being very thoughtful. We're going to a lot of ends to do that. But at the end of the day, nobody's going to taste that food except, my husband and I. And so the end product, in a way, is less important than the process and the journey. And that has been liberating. It's, allowed me to think, am I cooking mindlessly? Am I cooking mindfully? Am I cooking randomly? Am I cooking deliberately? Am I cooking cruelly? Am I cooking compassionately? And I realized that at the end of the day, there's really no line that separates our food habits from our lives. Sure. And the way we eat is the way we live. And until I had this moment and clarity.
Interrupt you, Hanan, but as you're talking, a verse crossed my mind from Abasa, which says, فَلْيَنْظُرِ الْإِنسَانُ إِلَى طَعَامِهِ, where the human is actually asked to look at his food and question the source, where it came from, its history, and all that. Go on.
Absolutely. No, to me, that's been the blessing of this Ramadan, is that it's cleared away all the clutter. Yes, the social part is important, the connection, the giving, but it was a time to really focus, reflect inward, and realize that our food habits is our lives. And if you want to change your life going forward, the pandemic is a major rupture. It's a transformational moment. We're not going to go back to a life that we had before. And so this is a time to think of what that new life can be like and the role that food plays in it.
Okay.
So I'm very alhamdulillah for everything we've had.
I think if I may add also, to the point of how culture is, or the food is very connected to our culture. Throughout my research, maybe regarding a lot of the ingredients that are included in the traditional dishes, I found out that a lot of them are not local ingredients. Maybe let's say 90% of them. It's an infusion of a different culture, because in the past and still till this day, there's a lot of trade that's happening. And I love the idea of that cultural exchange. So for example, the biryani, after like I've asked around and things, I realized that it's actually, it comes from India, but then it also became one of the traditional dishes in the UAE. A lot of the ingredients like the saffron, and a lot of like herbs, they come from, for example, from Africa, from India, from Iran, Afghanistan, all of these surrounding countries. So I think that's a very interesting point, in how also the geographical location of where you're at is influenced by the different countries and the different cultures that are around you. Hence the similarity between the local dishes and the Indian dishes. I think that infusion of culture and that influence, it's been going on for many years, of course. And I think it's something that's very interesting. It's something that I really want to also learn more about. So I'm including it as part of my book. There's going to be a spread that contains the spice map. So people who can track back all of the ingredients, the ingredients that are from the traditional recipes, you can see like each ingredient where it's coming from to make like one dish.
Yeah, thank you, Asha. Mufaddal can add on that, but because we're running short on time, I feel like this discussion can actually go on forever. But if you can add on to it with the next, I'd say try to wrap it up in a minute, please.
I agree with Hanan that a lot of the dishes that we're looking at across cultures, I think right now it's recipes don't matter as much. I think we're more looking at the basics. It's that survival instinct which has kind of kicked in for everyone. So it's about those comfort dishes that are made with the simplest ingredients and which you can share with the people you have at home. But I think on the ritual side, I think we see it in everyone's initiatives over here, whether it is sharing stories through virtual iftars, or whether you're trying to serve the community, or whether you're trying to serve the people who are the most important right now with what Chef Khalid is trying to do. I think it's continuing that act of giving, and that is so central to Ramadan. I think we're all trying to find ways to maintain that connection through some sort of khidmah. And I think that's the most important. I think that's the part of the spiritual core in Ramadan, which is khidmah. How can you serve others during this time? So yeah, I think that's I think there's a sense of whatever you cook in Ramadan, especially when you're most people are cooking while they're fasting. So I think it also brings about a sense of meditation, a sense of focus when you're doing that food, because you know you're doing it for someone else. It's a very mindful process, as Hanan said. And I think it's a joy that comes when you're able to give it to someone, however it is. I think that is part of that spiritual journey that we undergo through Ramadan. So I think it's about those things. And yeah, about energy and connection as well. Like Aisha said, so many ingredients in Emirati cuisine have been historically brought here by trade. And although people say that Emirati food is very traditional, it's served in large quantities, I think what we don't end up seeing is kind of breadth and variety that it has. The cuisine has paid host to over the years, and that's what we try to do in our tours, is showcase.
I think Mufaddal's cutting off.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
Okay, I'll quickly jump on to the Q&A. We have Her Excellency Noor Al-Kaabi, the Minister of Culture and Knowledge Development, here with us tonight, and she has a question to all the panelists. Her question is if you guys can share your favorite recipe that is linked to a family member, and what does that memory trigger?
Start.
Asha, go on, since you took the mic first.
Basically, because after you, Khalid, if you're gonna.
No. I thought the minister was coming up. I was like, okay. I'm good now.
She shared her question privately. Please.
Okay, I'd have to say, for me personally, I think the لقيمات is one of my favorites. Because I think it's related back to it's linked to my childhood, and it's something that we used to have every time when I go to my grandmother's house. It's a must. So yeah, that's my answer.
Hanan?
I'm gonna wait to the end. I'm gonna wait to the end. Let Khalid go.
Khalid, go on.
Okay, so yes, القيمات, definitely. You know it.
Yeah.
It's لقيمات.
Why though?
Yes, because it's fried and it's crispy.
And it's yummy.
It's so good.
Does it trigger?
Well, I mean, for me personally, I think, it's just different. But what I really connect with is my grandma's stew. I mean, we used to have it every time. It's just this nice, decadent, like lamb stew, and it's full of like all these nice vegetables. And then you get this nice, freshly baked bread on the side that you get to like soak with this. Oh my God, it was so good. And then yeah, and now it's just, trying to maintain a good, healthy, lifestyle as much as possible, with the lack of movement. We try to, as much as possible, stay active at least, and but you do have to like treat yourself, as Hanan said earlier about comfort food. That is why I can't wait to start eating this nice Oreo inspired cookie. But yes, that's for
That's
but
not,
yeah, but
not fair. You should share some.
Definitely. But yes, so for me it's the lamb stew, the way it's cooked. Back before, like in the early 70s and late 60s, people didn't used to cook with sautéing and like lots of oil. So what they would do is basically they would start with the fat. Then after the fat, which is basically something you would get from like your lamb or whatever, whatever protein that you're going to work with, you start by applying the fat first. And once it starts to render, and then all the fatty parts starts to melt, then you would use that as the base. Or in some cases, which were later on introduced, was to cook with ghee as well. Before using ghee, people used to cook with the fat of the animal, and then that would also add a depth of flavor, but also like very high in cholesterol, which is why people stopped doing that recently. But it does carry a very distinct flavor, and my grandma still cooked that way, but that dish, the lamb casserole, it's just the thing that really resonates with me whenever I think of a family meal. And no matter how much I've tried to recreate it, she would always say that it's good, but there's still something missing. So
it's not good. It's not her way. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I mentioned
it's not with the hand. Yeah.
Yeah. Exactly.
Is the most important kind of measurement to it.
Exactly.
And also referring back to what Hanan was saying. The food you create, it's like the energy that you have just goes into it. When our grandmothers used to cook for like their household, they used to do it with a lot of passion. Like it's like they're feeding their kids, So I think mood and energy just goes into what you create in food.
مفضل go
I think since Eid is around the corner, I think the dish that I'm really thinking about right now is biryani. And it's the biryani that I learned to make from my mom. But then there are all these stories about my father and about how on Fridays he used to take over the kitchen and push everyone out and make his secret biryani recipe. And it's about learning. I think it's very special to me because it took time for me to learn and perfect. It's still like Khalid said, the thing. There's always that difference that you have, but what I enjoy is the effort that it takes to make it and the kind of cooking and patience that it takes.
Mudaffar, do you seal your biryani with a pastry dough?
At home, no. At home, we just do it a little more with the cloth. So not usually, but I think that method is most effective when you're doing a very large pot. But otherwise, I think just the cloth works.
Okay, so it's time for you, Hanan, to answer the question.
Yeah, I mean, it's so hard. I had to, okay, but then instinctively, when Her Excellency asked what is our favorite recipe or one that reminds me of home, there are actually two. But first, I must say something that lugemat, that is the one thing that I definitely missed this Ramadan because my Emirati friends used to send them over and they were delicious and hot. And so I had to actually give it a try myself. My dear friend Asma sent me a lugemat making machine. Have you seen them?
Yes.
Yep.
I recently found out that my parents got it, which is very funny because we used to get it from my grandma's house and now we're going to start making it at home. Or I think
so she couldn't send me the actual lugemat, so she sent me the machine. And that's the hardest part of the lugemat. It's not the dough, but it's actually, you know, picking up the dough and dropping it. And so now I have a machine that drops them 3 at a time, and it actually worked. So I'm pretty excited because I had to, you know, make it myself. So that's one thing Ramadan taught me. But my two favorite recipes, one is a sweet, one is a savory. It's mughli. I don't know if you know mughli, but it's a Levantine. My grandma, my teta, Allah yarhamha, in Syria, and mughli is made when on celebratory occasions when a woman gives birth, and so to celebrate the child, it's a caraway powder with lots of spices and cornstarch, and then decorated with lots of nuts and coconut. It's delicious, but it's really that okay. It takes forever to make. You're stirring all the time, so it's a big production, and you wait when mughli is made. It's everybody's invited. Yani, we'd made it even if nobody gave birth. It was just like you wanted to eat mughli, and so it's made in large quantities. It's shared with neighbors. It's delivered until now. My friends, my close friends here in Emirat, when they do mughli, they'll send me one, or if I do, I'll send them. So, and I also had delivered my first child, Tala, in New York in the early 90s on my own. And I had to learn to make mughli because that was the tradition. So it became even more special when I did it myself, holding a newborn in one hand and stirring in the other. Yeah, so maybe I'll just leave it at that recipe. Mughli is my favorite.
Okay, since we are over time, we just have few minutes for 2 more questions from the audience. One is for you, Hanan. Is what would you recommend I think you've answered it directly into the chat, so thank you for that. That saved us on time. Khalid, there was another question for you, whether this initiative is still going to happen post-Ramadan, of what you do with first liners and people in need.
So the idea was to basically accumulate most of what we got to push it out in Ramadan, so that you know, people would get the extra ajr. But we're not planning on stopping. So if the contributions keep coming in, and inshallah, we're able to continue this initiative, then definitely, for us, we're able to push it all the way until the end of the year. We don't mind. But at the same time, we will try as much as possible to also, work with the facility that we are located in, which is Abu Dhabi Youth Hub. And if the youth hub opens, then we're also going to try to, balance between the two operations, which is the meal plan initiative. I call it meal plan, but it's the meal giving initiative, and then also the a la carte operation that we would have for the food buffet cafe.
Well, thanks and good luck with that. Inshallah, this pandemic is over soon, and Hanan gets her game out rather than making it at home.
It's not the same, definitely.
Ash's grandma also gets her game out, and Fadal goes back on touring people and bringing them together. And Khalid gets to launch his new menu, which is what I'm dying for, honestly.
And actually, the new menu. See, when we first started in Zain, I wanted to basically just work with the team. See, I have also a day job, and I'm not able to fully spend my time in the kitchen. But the team that I had when I first started was new to me, so I had to work on training them basically on the basics. And with this whole thing that happened, it had allowed me to spend even more time. Yes, you'll get it, inshallah. Yeah, it allowed me to spend more time in the kitchen, and now I'm more comfortable working with my team, and this is why in the next rotation, inshallah, I'm expecting to launch a few Emirati-inspired dishes. Obviously, don't hold it, on me that they're called a specific Emirati name, but they don't look at all like what the Emirati dish
You're going to create a revolution, Khalid. You're going to create a revolution.
What we're trying to, at least show people that, yes, these are the same ingredients, but they're made, they're made with less, fat, and the meat for once is not overcooked. So we're going to try as much as possible to make sure that we present it in a way that would be more appealing, hopefully, for our international audience. And also appealing to our Emiratis as well. I just look forward to seeing what the purists would say. But inshallah, they still enjoy the dishes as they are, without associating it much to the Emirati traditional dishes.
I think, Khalid, you could say that food, food and ingredients know no borders, no national borders. They migrated for centuries, and so we should eat.
Exactly, and the thing is that with the variety of the spices and ingredients that we've been exposed to over the years in Emirati food, I feel like the possibilities are just endless. The way that you would create something in a different way. But trying as much as possible to stick to the roots. So as you guys said earlier, in terms of how things are being sold right now, we are also trying as much as possible to push for a more sustainable menu, utilizing the local produce as opposed to imports the way we used to before. And yes, definitely 90% of the food that we consume according to a study from Her Excellency Maryam Mehri, is imported. So for us, since we have the knowledge to make the local food taste good, we're trying to hopefully become more sustainable. But I mean, not too much, but we'll try, we'll try to stay, as sustainable as possible, but also bringing you, some of the fan favorites that you might want to try that may be seen on an international menu.
Khalid, as a challenge, you could try to.
Sorry, Asha, I need to cut you guys off, but this conversation could really go on forever. It's been amazing, and I was really honored to be with you and joining all of you. We shall continue the conversation perhaps privately on a different platform, but we've taken from the audience's time already. So I'd like to thank Fikra, who are the collaborators of the Cultural Salon, and of course the Ministry of culture and knowledge development, who supports the Cultural Salon. Of course, Nahla Tabbah, who was somewhat part of this discussion at the beginning of it. And yes, if to those who do not follow us on our social media platforms, please do follow us, both 1971 and Fikra, to keep in, to stay on loop on what's going on with the online activations through this period. Thank you all, and I hope the audience enjoyed it. I've enjoyed it myself, and as I said, this conversation could really go on forever.
Thank you, Fatma. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us. It was really
كل عام وانتم بخير.
أنتم بخير.